will ask to come back to Frankfurt and talk to the state legislature also about passing an amendment on term limits. I will work very hard if I have a position of influence within the Republican Party to say that our next candidate will be from the Tea Party and our next candidate will support term limits. If we have a presidential candidate who fights for term limits and a balanced budget amendment, we'll get it. That's what we need. We need a national movement, a national referendum. We've got the movement. Now we need to coalesce, get candidates, and move this thing forward. But we have to have new rules. Term limits goes a long way. People say, oh, you're not going to build any roads. I say, no. Let's build roads based on their objective value, not on the seniority of the senators. It makes no sense to me for Robert Byrd to get all the money for West Virginia just because he's been there for 50 years in Senate. Makes no sense. But before we get all high and mighty and say it's just those darn Democrats, you remember the bridge to nowhere. The bridge to nowhere that Sarah Palin talked about was an earmark by a Republican congressman. The earmarking, the pork barrel spending is on both sides of the aisle, and that's what many people don't understand about the Tea Party movement, is I tell people it's a bipartisan chastisement over the debt. It's that both parties deserve some blame for the debt, and that we need new people in both parties in Washington if we're ever going to fix it.
Exactly.
They need new rules. They don't obey their own rules. You remember when Senator Bunning stood up and did the right thing about 2 months ago? He stood up and said, you've passed pay-as-you-go. Why don't you adhere to it? Within 3 weeks of passing it, they broke their own rules twice. And so when they brought up the unemployment benefits, they said, Senator Bunning simply said, take them out of the existing pool of funds, don't add to the deficit. Those were the rules they passed on themselves, and they broke their own rules. And he stood up by himself with very little support, even from the Republican Party. So Mongiardo went to protest in front of his office in Lexington. So we said, why don't we counter-protest? So we showed up, and we had 3 times as many people as Mongiardo. While Mongiardo was up there justifying adding to the debt, our people were all chanting, pay go, pay go, pay go. And shortly thereafter, even though we hadn't anticipated it, we got Senator Bunning's endorsement. And I think he appreciated the support.
All right.